What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you an updated meta analysis for the November 2020 format. We just had what's probably going to be the biggest tournament of November and maybe the rest of the year in the TCG. We'll just have to see, but that was the Luxury Championship Series VIII. This event had over 200 players, I believe 208 in total, which is pretty big when you consider an online tournament. But as you can see here by this pie chart, there's a deck that not a lot of people had faith in, and that is Virtual World taking up the most representation. Not by too much, obviously. As you can see, it was just one higher than decks like Noble Knight, Zodiac, and then only two more than Dragon Link. But when you look at that in the overall scope and the fact that people were looking to this deck as not really able to hold a candle to stuff like Dragon Link or Noble Knight, and here it is with the highest percentage of representation of the overall meta, I think sitting at about 11 to 12%, that's pretty significant. What's also nice when you look at this is how diverse this metagame actually is. Look how many different decks and strategies emerged. Usually when you see one of these pie charts, you're going to see that one deck's taking up like 20% of the field, 30% of the field. This is post Phantom Rage. This is one of the largest tournaments we have to look to when it comes to acquiring data and have some of the highest caliber of players competing in a tournament like this. So I think it's incredible to see a deck like Virtual World just come straight out of Phantom Rage and immediately have some of the highest representation. But once we get into the top 16, it doesn't stop there, because Virtual World, yes, had the highest representation in the top 16 breakdown as well. You can see here on the pie chart that Virtual World took up 7 of the top 16 slots, and right after that was Zodiac. Yes, Zodiac is back once again, but that's not really much of a surprise. If you watched my previous meta analysis, we covered multiple first place Zodiac deck lists that came out of release weekend for Phantom Rage, and so Zodiac was obviously going to be hyped, right? But it's cool to see that a week later it is still doing quite well. We also have decks in here, of course, like Dragon Link, like your Noble Knight, even a Dinosaur and a Dogmatica Invoke should all making it as well, and we're going to be covering some of those deck lists today to give you guys a more in-depth look to see how these strategies progress. Now, of course, we're going to start with the first place deck list, going to Gabriel Nets. Gabriel has just been on a tear. I mean, this has got to be one of the best players of 2020, winning tournaments left and right in the online environment, and here he is once again taking first place with Virtual World. Again, Virtual World did take up 7 of the top 16, so that's a pretty big statement considering this deck was flying very heavily under the radar leading up to its release. I mentioned in several videos that you guys should have picked up those cards because they're probably going to be going up in price now if they haven't already, and if you do buy them, be sure to use my links down in the description to help directly support the channel. But let's go ahead and get back to Gabriel's list here so you guys can take a look at it. So it's pretty straightforward because he's playing 3 of all of the main deck Virtual World cards. This is what you want to do. For anyone who may not be familiar with this deck, Virtual World is a combo deck that is trying to get and establish a true King of all calamities as quickly as possible. This deck can easily get into rank 9, so if there is a deck to get true King of all calamities banned, it will most likely be Virtual World. The deck's also pretty cool though because it also has a lot of controlling elements. It actually centralizes heavily around a continuous trap card, and what's nice about this is that this card allows you to pop cards on your opponent's field, giving you outs to a lot of cards that most decks don't typically have access to. If you're going first with this deck going up against combo decks, usually true King of all calamities is enough to just shut your opponent down because not many decks have ways to deal with calamities, and if they threaten calamities with something like, say, infinite impermanence, you can use the trap card to pop your own calamities. Calamities will still resolve because it's no longer on the field for impermanence to have a target. The lingering effect will last, which is one of the reasons why this card is broken, and then you can just set up and establish another true King of all calamities on the following turn if you don't just kill your opponent outright because they're still under that lock. So that's really impressive. The deck has a lot of tutor ability in being able to access most of the cards throughout the deck, and the cards have a lot of very good effects. I mean, Lulu allows you to search, Lao Lao is like a wolf bark allowing you to special summon from the grave, Gigi is like a Scarm that basically allows you to get a resource back from the graveyard to your hand, so that's pretty nice for follow-up plays. Lily allows you to Foolish Burial twice just to get a bunch of setup going, and all the cards work very well together. The deck does have some consistency issues. I think one of the biggest issues with this and a lot of combo decks is that you need to have multiple of these monsters in your opening hand to really play. That's where this deck can struggle compared to something like Zodiac, where Zodiac prides itself on its 1-card starters. This deck needs multiple cards to play, and so if you can stop them early before they get set up, that's one of the ways that you can stop them before they start taking over. Now, when you look at the rest of Nets' list, you see cards like Pot of Desires for increased consistency. We have triple tactical talent at 3. I think this is very nice because at the very least, if your opponent does try to hand trap you, you can either draw more cards, potentially get into more combo combo pieces to keep going, or you can also look at your opponent's hand, ensure they have no more hand traps, and continue to combo off, knowing that you're going to be perfectly safe. It's also nice because it's an out to Dragoon, which I know a lot of decks aren't really playing at the moment, but this deck doesn't necessarily have the easiest way to deal with a card like that, and so just having that extra insurance is always nice. Looking at the hand trap lineup here, we have 3 copies of Ash Blossom and 3 copies of Gamma. Gamma's especially powerful in this deck because Psyframe Driver is a level 6, and what's cool about that is because you need a lot of level 3 and 6 monsters, Gamma's nice because a lot of the monsters activate in hand, so if your opponent were to use some sort of hand trap, you can use Gamma because you have no monsters on the field yet to negate that effect, so that's kind of cool. They're kind of like the True Kings where they all activate and have one giant effect when they activate in the hand, but Gamma's just good because if you're going second, it not only negates the effect but removes that monster from the field. It's one of the most powerful hand traps for a reason. Obviously, at past turn 1, it can be a little bit more difficult to justify, but it's there for a reason. And then a nice piece of tech out of the weekend was Skill Drain. Now, Skill Drain's great because it doesn't necessarily interact with the virtual world cards all too much, but what's nice about it is that it auto-wins you a bunch of matchups that don't really have native outs to a card like Skill Drain, and if you absolutely have to remove it, you can use your own trap card to pop it, and you can keep playing freely. So having that sort of flexibility to play a powerful card like Skill Drain is incredibly good. We're going to pivot here into the second place deck list piloted by Pack, my good friend, and he was playing Foolish Burial Goods. Foolish Burial Goods is nice because you're able to get a copy of King Long, which is the searcher spell that you have to banish from the graveyard, to give you a little bit more added consistency. Now, the thing is, you're not really necessarily gaining a resource, you're kind of just allowing yourself to sculpt your hand a little bit, but it does come at the cost of some card advantage, so it's definitely an argument to weigh. But a lot of players were playing this. I think it's still in the experimentation phase as to what the correct direction to go is with this, but it's just another card that you can possibly consider. Pack was also on Nibiru, which we saw the first place list was not playing, and Nibiru is still a great card. Again, Nibiru is weird because sometimes decks can play through it regardless, and so it doesn't even matter all that much. We see it in the main or the side deck very frequently, so while combo decks are still very heavily played in the meta, Nibiru is probably going to stick around. Next, we have one of the top 4 deck lists, which is again another virtual world list. The reason I wanted to talk about this in particular because it looks very identical to the rest. If you look in the extra deck, this player was playing a copy of Ultimaya Zulkin and Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. This is a really cool 2-card combination for the extra deck that if you are able to get it out, which isn't too difficult with the way that the deck functions, since you can get out level 6s very easily. You can use the trap card in the graveyard to banish it to up the level of your level 3s to level 6, and then use those 6s to make Zulkin, and then ultimately summon Crystal Wing. And what's nice about that is that you can typically do that before 5 summons to insulate yourself from something like Nibiru, and then if you have enough other combo pieces, you can continue to make stuff like True King of All Calamities and the like, while under the protection of Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. Synchro Dragon's also an out to, I guess, something like Dark Dragoon as well, so that's something of note, but this is another direction that some players were opting to take, and so I just wanted to highlight that difference because maybe it's something that you'll want to play in your version of the deck. And then rounding out that top 4, we have one of Yu-Gi-Oh's finest, Cam Neal, on Infernoble Knight. Infernoble Knight's not going anywhere anytime soon because this deck is so proficient at just being able to rip apart your opponent's hand with cards like Smoke Grenade, set up nearly unbreakable boards with multiple negations, and it can play through Disruption rather well. Infernoble was a very good call. It had the second highest representation, I believe, in the tournament, if not third, but it's still going to be a deck that you can expect to see a lot of moving forward. It's also worth mentioning that Virtual World has a hand loop of its own, so Infernoble Knight's not the only deck that can do that anymore. It can loop 2 to 3, I think even 4 cards out of your opponent's end and still end on a True King of All Calamities, so that's impressive. Is it win more? Maybe, we'll have to see, but I definitely think it was something worth mentioning. Now, moving on to the top 8, let's go ahead and talk about some of the former best strategies of the format, and one of those being Dragon Link. Here's a list for you right here to go ahead and look at, and you can see that there's been some adjustments that have been made. We have cards like Kaijus entering the main deck here as a hedge against things like True King of All Calamities. If your opponent doesn't shotgun the True King of All Calamities, you can actually just Kaiju over it and your opponent can't do much about it. So I think that was a pretty good call here, and you're probably going to start to see more Kaijus maybe enter the main or side deck as a result, but it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamic shifts between Kaijus and Infinite Impermanence and other cards even to help prevent stuff like True King of All Calamities. Calamities from being able to resolve. Then moving on, we have Zodiac, and this is definitely a different Zodiac deck than you might have expected. This is a very defensively focused Zodiac deck. I mean, look at the dimensional shifters in the main deck. You've got Macrocosmos, you have Mistake, Ice Dragon's Prison, and then you have like 12 hand traps on top of it. I mean, this player was coming to play with the combo decks and also having the trap cards to really just control the tempo of the game. This deck is just so powerful with its one-card starters and has such flexibility in that you can really tailor it to whatever the meta is starting to look like. It's really not a surprise that he managed to see the top 8. I'm definitely sure some of these tech cards really put in work. Next up, we have Paulo, who's playing his Eldritch Zodiac deck. This is a pretty cool hybrid. I really love the synergy between some of the Zodiac and the Eldritch cards. I think they pair rather well together. You can see once again here we have the 12 hand traps being the Veilers, the Ash Blossoms, and the Nibiru's, and the Imperms. Just a very small Zodiac lineup of 2 Thoroughblade, 1 Whiptail, a Ram, and a Barrage, and of course your Tenki for your searchers. And then you even have the Eldritch cards and the Dogmatica cards to boot, just making a very, very well-rounded deck that is just very tempo-oriented. It's very just classic Yu-Gi-Oh! And going up against some of these combo decks, you're definitely going to need to have some unfair cards. I think this is a pretty cool list, and anyone who wants to play Dogmatica Eldritch Zodiac is definitely going to look to this for inspiration. And then rounding out the top 8, we have a deck that a lot of people are going to be excited for, and that deck is Dogmatica Invoke Shaddoll. Yes, Shaddoll making a top cut appearance. It's been quite some time, but you know, Winda has win in the name for a reason and is still a hell of a card with all these combo decks running rampant. This is just a very solid overall deck. He's not playing around with the hand traps, bringing the big guns, 3 Nibiru, 3 Gamma, and just having a very overall well-rounded deck that can just generate a ton of advantage, really slow the game down to his own pace, do what it does best. I mean, it is Shaddoll, and congratulations to him. And then as we approach the end of the video, I wanted to highlight a couple of the top 16 deck lists that caught my eye. First up was Alex Pavlenko's top 16 Zodiac list, and just look at the amount of going second cards in this list. We have Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, we have Gamma Seal, we have Moonlit Chill, we have Nibiru, Imperm, we even have Zoo King Alpha. He was coming to go second, he was coming to stop his opponent, and he was looking to Zeus some people all day. Even in the side deck, he's got Gammas, he's got Skullmeisters. He was not playing around. This is really cool because Zodiac can go first as well as it can go second, because again, you can kind of mold it to whatever type of deck you're trying to build. I definitely think the top 8 list was a little bit more suited to going first just because it was playing a lot of different types of trap cards. But again, if you want to play a more going second list with cards like Alpha and the Kaijus, you can very well do so. I think there was someone who was playing like a 20-something hand trap version of Zodiac, and I think they just missed out on the top 16. That would have been a hell of a list to see, but yeah, Zodiac going first or going second, it's got some great options, and it's looking to be one of the strongest decks of the format. And then wrapping up the video, we have one last deck from Franco Persano, being the top 16 Dinosaur list. Here's the list for you guys to take a look at. Now, Dinosaur's in a bit of a weird position because it typically wants to go second, but the problem is when you look at that compared to Virtual World can set up True King of All Calamities very easily, and Dinosaur really can't do much to combat that. And even if Dinosaur tries to set up a card like Mystic Mine against Virtual World, the thing is, Virtual World is one of the few decks that actually has a main deck out to Mystic Mine being the Trap card. The Trap card can pop any face-up card, and so Dinosaur can't shield themselves behind Mystic Mine like they would against other combo decks like, let's say, Dragon Link, and so it actually has a rather weak matchup against Virtual World for that reason, because when you're staring down Calamities every single time you're forcing your opponent to go first, it's really difficult to play through, and a lot of people were coming into this event wanting to play Dinosaur because Dinosaur has been doing so well. A lot of people just love the deck in general, and so it's very cool to see that it did still make the top 16, but as long as Virtual World's at the top of the totem pole, I think it's going to be much more difficult for Dinosaur to thrive, or it's going to have to change up its strategy in a way to be able to figure out how to handle a card like Calamities, but we'll just have to see how the meta progresses moving forward. But guys, that's going to do it for my updated meta analysis. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. This is really exciting for Yu-Gi-Oh! I love when we get a new deck that shakes up the meta game. It's going to be exciting to see where things end up. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. And if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.